Florida State adds yet another verbal commitment.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I'm your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. You can find us free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Please hit that like button and that notification bell. Today's episode is about Gregory Zae Thomas as well. The defensive back out of American Heritage in South Florida has committed to the Florida State Seminoles. He is commitment number 9. We're going to break down what his game is like, his recruiting rankings, who went after him, and why he's important to the Noles, as well as the other defensive backs still on the board and where Florida State is at. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down and sports are drying up just a little bit. Don't remember, it's still in the summertime, but FanDuel is hooking you up with all kinds of opportunities for boosts and bonuses every day. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. All right. We're going to talk recruiting here, and in a big box way. It's amazing how Florida State is just went slow in recruiting. Now they got like 4 commitments in a week or so. They just got Chase Lofton, the tight end out of Omaha. I did a podcast about that earlier today. This is an incredibly quick run, and we're getting a couple more coming here, by the way, too. Myron Charles is committed, but this is about Zae Thomas. 6'2", 195, American Heritage High School, 4-star recruit on 247 and Rivals, 3-star on On3 and ESPN. I personally think he's a top 150 kid because of his length. 6'2", 195 pounds. He's put together. He could play safety. Note, he is not. He is a corner, and I think that's where he will play. In certain situations, he could also be a nickel, and that's also something that every team needs, by the way. Got to have a bigger nickel option against some of these teams that use a tight end, etc. Thomas can do that. And then finally, just the way he can run. Most guys cannot change direction. They do not have the fluidity in their hips and their ability to break down and change direction the way Thomas is blessed to do. This young man has the ability to do that, and he also has something else, and that's above the shoulders. He's smart. It's one thing to be fast in a line. You know your target destination before the play starts, and you just run in a line. Football's not played that way. To get your destination, you have to make just absolute split-second decisions. Quickly, accurately, all things must come together. Thomas will find the route that's best for him to get to the football, make a tackle, make a play on the ball, or get a pick. He maximizes. He doesn't just jump a route by looking at the first move that a receiver goes with. He studies the play, he makes the right decisions, and he goes downhill from there. He's also a physical young man. Most guys that play defensive back, they prefer to be in coverage, and that's fine. Many DBs you can attack in the run game with toss sweeps, outside zone, quarterback runs, making defensive backs miss because they don't like contact as much, especially corners. Thomas is not that guy. If you want to screen him, okay. He will come down and make a tackle. He will get physical with a guy that's bigger than him. He will find a way around him if it's a player he can't take on head on like an offensive lineman or tight end. Physicality is still a part of his game. In today's college football world especially, you even see it at the high school level to a certain degree, they will screen you and run at you to death if you will not be physical. Doesn't matter if you're the best corner in the country. Screen, 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 screen. Until you tackle, until you help your teammates, until you fill your role, they will come at you. That's just part of it, especially when you're in a league that plays Clemson, who screens very, very well. This is important. And Miami does it pretty good. Louisville's got an offensive coordinator as their head coach, basically. He's both. Brom's really good. You need to have guys that can tackle. This is a big, important pickup for Florida State in that regard as well. Getting these kind of DBs that are bigger guys that can handle the outside with these teams and their speedy receivers with the ability to tackle is everything. Final point on him, he's just smart. He doesn't get overzealous and think just because he made a play, the next play is all his. He's very consistent. When you meet him, when you interview him, when you talk to him, when you shake his hand, he's a very even-keeled kid. That's going to translate well in anything that Zae Thomas does. On the gridiron, off the gridiron, representing Florida State, this is the kind of kid you want around. Just a good guy. Doesn't hurt, by the way, that he's at American Heritage, a program that prepares kids for college football very, very well. I think Zay will make an impact at Florida State pretty early, probably a sophomore year in terms of all 22 on the field. And pretty much from day one, I think Norvell and his staff will be able to play Zae Thomas on special teams. Which ones, I don't know, but I would assume punt and kickoff both are under consideration just immediately. The physicality and the ability to run at his length with those long arms, sign me up. That's a really good place to be. A couple other things about him. Offer list, picked Florida State over Clemson, LSU, Miami, Penn State, Tennessee, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Missouri, Texas A&M. Bona fide programs going to bowl games, bona fide programs in terms of their recruiting cachet, big-time programs down south, however you want to put it. Also, with him, if you look at like the ratings and everything, I think he'll move up. They play some big games this year at American Heritage, just like they normally do. He's going to be on center stage. That's going to be a really interesting situation. I think he could end up in the top 150 pretty quick. Not out of the question he could end up in the top 100. He will certainly, playing in South Florida, be challenged quite a bit. And now that he's a Florida State commitment, there'll be more eyeballs on him than ever. Not that American Heritage doesn't get plenty of opportunity for that, but that's certainly something to think about. As a parting shot, just to go back to his intelligence, this is something I wrote down. He doesn't grab a lot. When there's a deep ball, you know how even NFL guys do this. They're looking at the eyes of the receiver. The receiver looks up. He starts to move his arms. The DB freaks. Oh, no, he's going to catch a pass. Well, obviously, you're there to cover it. Do something about it besides grab, punch through the chest, etc., and just get an easy flag. Thomas is pretty good about not doing that from what I have personally seen. That doesn't mean he's perfect, and all high school DBs still have to improve, but I like his patience, playing through the football, dislodging it, and waiting to the last moment to make contact with the person that he's defending. Too many high school DBs, no matter their speed, length, etc., fail at that, and it drives me nuts because nothing changes the momentum of a game like a big penalty down the field. That's something that I'm very curious about why he's so good at it. I'm going to watch it a little bit more this year, but Thomas is very, very good at that. Next up, since Thomas is the first commit for Florida State, we're going to look at a few other things in regards to who's still on the board, what it means for Florida State, and kind of where they need to go long-term because they're in a really, really good spot with DB recruiting because it's maybe their deepest spot on the roster, so they could be selective. How many do they want? Who's still on the board? That's going to be what we're talking about next here at Locked On Seminole. And I think Florida State fans are going to like this quite a bit. So that's next here at Locked On Seminoles. I love sports, and I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. All the different sports aren't going quite like they were before, but there's still things you can do. FanDuel helps you get the opportunities to watch sports whenever you want. All you have to do is open up the app and dream up bets at any time in time that you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is also hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So most Florida State fans probably know this, but the Noles are pretty loaded at DB. The last time I talked to Zay, he had mentioned to me that the Noles wanted to take one corner, maybe two, depending on circumstance, one or two safeties, just going to be selective. So I went back through the kids that have visited here in the last month or so, and I'm looking at the list. So we're just going to go down some of the kids I don't necessarily think they're going to get, what's going on with them, and then the players that are still on the board they got a shot with. It's a really unique list. So here we go. Shamar Arnaud, just committed to Southern Cal. He's from the same high school as Julian Lewis, the quarterback up in Carrollton. That was a kid that Florida State liked a lot. That's tough, but that's recruiting. USC gets him. The one that I don't know about, I don't know what category to put him in, is Ben Hanks. That young man is at Booker T down in Miami. Obviously, his dad played at Florida. If you didn't know, he's a big-time linebacker in the 90s for the Gators. That's tough. Miami likes him, etc. A lot of different opportunities. I've heard Florida State made a move with him, but I still need to see it. I don't care what information I'm fed. I do not care what he says. I need to see a kid pick Florida State when his dad played in Florida. Just me. Call it what it is. I need to see it. It's hard to do that, especially when it's somebody like Hanks, like he was like the center of their defense at that point. It's one thing to be there. I guess it's another to be that guy. But Florida State's in the mix, so we'll see on him. Jadon Blair is going to pick Notre Dame later this week. That one is over. Expect him to pick Notre Dame this coming Friday. He's the big-time safety out of North Carolina. Jabari Antoine. I've heard different things on this one. This one's wild. He's at Westgate High School in Louisiana, just about an hour outside of Baton Rouge where LSU is. Decommitted from LSU. Decommitted. He's been to Florida State. He's been to Miami. I've heard Miami likes their chances a lot and their defense coordinators from his area. That gives me pause for Florida State, but he had a good visit there too. What will LSU do to keep him? Because their defense stinks. I mean, it's terrible. So maybe they find a way to get him in the fold and sell him on him being the switcheroo for LSU. Like, it's amazing to me, by the way, LSU secondary is bad. That should never be the case. But right now, I don't think that's trending very well for LSU. Maybe Florida State could still get him, and that's, in my opinion, kind of what Zay was talking about. If you can get that kid, you got to take him. That's a national recruit. Another really long athletic corner. Absolutely, I would take it. Jordan Young, the DB out of North Carolina. Sounds like Clemson. Florida State's in on it, but probably isn't going to end up there. Safety is the most likely position for him, although he's really good. He might be able to play corner. I expect Clemson. Onis Cannonbanning. Sounds like Tennessee's made a move. Florida State, I thought, was the team there at one point, but it sounds like Tennessee from all I've heard. We'll see. He was in South Carolina now, but that's a player Florida State had on campus already for a visit. But Darian Clardy, he's a safety out of Escambia High School up in Pensacola. There's been a lot of great players out of there, including Emmett Smith over the years. Florida State's trending. That might be one of two safeties they end with. Really good football player. Another guy that I'm not sure is Bryce Fitzgerald, safety out of Columbus High School down in Miami, Florida. That kid doesn't know where he's going yet. May take a little while to play out. That's what I've heard. I haven't talked to him recently, so I don't have a lot of intel, but he's a kid that I think just about any of the big three would be happy with. Great kid, good student, his length. He could play receiver if you wanted him to. Really athletic kid. All right, Tony Williams, Palm Beach Central. He's committed to UCF. That's a kid Florida State had on campus. Would not be surprised if he ended up at Florida State or somewhere other than UCF. He's a good player. Could be a guy that could end up a free safety or corner. I think Florida State likes him in corner. Good athlete. Max Redmond out of Cardinal Newman down in South Florida. That's a kid Florida State has probably the best shot at. I know Illinois and some other schools are involved. Out of everybody I just mentioned, I think they'll get Redmond most likely. Point is, you're looking at four guys they got a pretty good shot at. They got one kid committed that's really good in Zae Thomas, and your secondary is loaded. So Florida State could, quote-unquote, lock in maybe 5 kids in this class, but you can only take so many guys before everybody just starts leaving. And that's why I think the comments that Zay made to me were really important. We're going to take 1, maybe 2 corners. It's kind of how he phased it with me when I spoke to him a couple weeks ago. And I thought it was interesting because when you look at Florida State's secondary, they do have a lot of depth at each spot. They can even play multiple guys at multiple spots and do well. But I don't even care about pulling up the depth chart because there's no spot there. I'm like, okay, they're in trouble. Florida State's got guys at all 4 spots plus the nickel. We're good. And I'm talking about depth. You've got to be picking kids that are only talented right now, but you got to be really cognizant of culture, which Florida State's done a great job with, obviously, the last couple of years. And Zay will fit, by the way, very, very well. I'm not worried about that at all. But I also think that's one of the reasons they may only take 3 or 4 guys when they're rolling a DB. And it's probably easy to recruit them because you got to get the right fits. In today's transfer portal era where you can get instant eligibility, thin-skinned kids are not going to like Florida State's depth chart. Everybody thinks they're going to come in and play. Then they get to college and they realize, okay, everybody else is good too. Oh, I'm not going to play. They transfer. You need kids that want to be at your school. Florida State is not here to be a feeder school for Florida Atlantic, Georgia State, Charlotte, James Madison, etc. They're not. They're here to be Florida State Seminoles, end all be all. Culture, the kids you recruit will be very, very important at DB the next year or two because they've gotten really good classes recently. The kids they brought in that were transfers have hit. I mean, they've really done well. Now the final piece, finding this class and matriculating it in this next spring. Some of these kids will enroll early, then end up signing. By the way, he's the first commitment in the secondary for the Noles. I think that Zae Thomas is going to be the choir, or me speaking to the choir here, but he's going to fit Florida State to a T. But that's also going to set the bar really high for the other kids they try to recruit. They're not going to just accept somebody because of their talent or their upside. It's going to be the off-the-field stuff about as much as anything else. I've been told several times they really want to meet with kids and be around them to find out the fit, which I think is smart, instead of just taking a commitment because he's a dude. And it's, you know, sometimes you can just watch film, watch 3 to 5 clips. You're like, okay, this is not hard. Great football prospect. Can he hang out here with our kids, not cause problems, not bitch too much about NIL or whatever? You need locker room guys. Even at the talent level we're talking about, you need to play in the secondary. That is an athletic position. You got to have kids that are going to be locker room guys. So that's what my take is on that. Once again, I think Max Redmond's the most likely, the guy to get added, probably Darian Clardy, the kid out of Pensacola, Escambia being the other. But Florida State, either way, is in a really good spot, and I'm really not too worried about it. All right, next up, we're going to talk about a couple of the kids that Florida State is still in on, where I see this class kind of getting into as we go to the season's beginning. We're right around the corner for football season now, getting ready to start the month of July. Where does Florida State stand in recruiting, and what's up next? That's here on Locked On Seminoles. Right after this, we're going to have some more news coming pretty soon. Tavion Wallace, Zadarius Zadarius Rainey Sale. Those two kids are linebackers. I think they'll get both of them. I think Sale is Monday. Wallace is right after. And there's a couple other kids. I'll leave it at that. They've got a good shot with. And a few kids are always possibilities just to pop. Florida State should be at 10-plus commitments really quick. They could be at 12 or more pretty quick. It's amazing. Because even myself, I'm like, when are these going to start happening? When are these going to start happening? Here were like 5 guys, right? You got Myron Charles and some other guys that commit, and all of a sudden, okay, we're getting close. You get Lofton, you get Thomas. They're rolling now. Remember me talking about they backloaded all those visits on June 21st? A lot of those kids were their prime targets. They're making their decisions. Florida State's in a good spot. Now the question is, can they finalize on some other kids that they didn't necessarily expect to get early? And that's part of recruiting. You got to go through the process. I like where Florida State's at, and they're being patient, and I think they're going to have another really good season. I believe Florida State has a chance to finish in the top 7-8 schools in recruiting, and it's kind of an old school Bobby Bowden approach from way back, because they oftentimes started slow in recruiting as well, and they would get a commitment from somebody, maybe 2 or 3 guys in the summer, but most of the elite kids, especially South Florida kid, would commit late. Either you roll the dice and you get them, or you don't on signing day with no backup plan, or you're not in the game. Florida State was one of the riskiest schools of recruiting, and I think some of the kids are in this class, well, not as many maybe as what the Bowden era had. There are going to be 3 or 4 really important recruits that will get to that point, and I'm not going to talk about them right now. I mean, they still may get on DJ Pickett. Who knows? Because that, even though he's committing in early October, I still think that's a signing day deal because everybody's going to keep coming after him, and kids like that. Florida State will do well to stay in the recruitment for a lot of kids while they're winning. And I think a couple other schools in the South that have high expectations that don't live up to it, namely Florida, they'll also be able to capitalize. Let's see. To that point, as a reminder, there's some possibilities with flips coming up here with a few schools, Florida State involved. Florida just lost on one of them, Solomon Thomas. A lot of people thought he was going to go to Florida. I was worried about it. Sticks with Florida State. Tramel Jones, some people thought he's going to Florida, sticks with Florida State. There's also Jalen Wiggins to think about. He's one of the other kids. I'll just throw that out there. Would not be surprised if he flipped to Florida State. It's possible. He's from Tallahassee Rickards. Florida State has a chance to make inroads for their own self while also pulling away from programs that they compete with, not only in-state, but are arch rivals. Last point here, we're going to get a few more commitments coming up. The recruiting classes overall in the nation, by the end of the week, I'd like to do kind of a broad-based podcast. If you have any questions or anything you want to do to drop a note, on YouTube. For those who watch this on YouTube, how would you like it done? Do you want to hear more about specific positions? I'm going to do a quarterback podcast too, where things stand with 25, 26 quarterbacks. That's going to come this week on Locked On Seminoles. Just want a broader base, because if the commitments happen, I'll break them down, and that's fine. But we're still a week or two away for I really want to start breaking down fall camp and ACC media days and all that. Let that stuff happen. We got a couple of weeks. Let's have fun with it. Open-ended discussion. Where's Florida State at in recruiting in a number of ways? Competing against Georgia, competing against Florida, competing against Miami. Who's better at each spot? I'm curious what everybody wants to know, and I'd love to do it. I'll probably do a little bit from the Future 50 camp I just went to as well. So those are a few of the events that I have coming up here on Locked On Seminoles, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope everybody enjoyed today's podcast, and please like and subscribe if you have not already, and share this podcast. I will see you again tomorrow on Locked On Seminoles.